Welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with host Lane Nordlund.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Cattlemen's Call podcast, everyone. Lane Nordlund joining you here today. And as we make our way through the fall of 2024, we've been busy out on our operation. The weather is getting a little bit crisper. There's frost on the ground in the mornings, a little bit of ice on the water tanks as well. So we got to kick those heaters on, but it is fall time in Montana where I call home, and I hope everyone's fall is going well wherever you're tuning in here today. And we are getting ready to preg check on our operation here in a few weeks. So a big day for us, and of course face-to-face time with the veterinarian on a good call, we could always say, as we're trying to plan for the future. And we're going to be talking with some veterinarians here today, discussing veterinary medicine, some issues that come along with veterinary medicine in our rural communities as well. We need to fill a need for these large animal vets, and there are resources available. And while there is challenges, there's also opportunities with this conversation here today. We are going to be joined today by Dr. Rosslyn Biggs, a veterinarian, of course, there at Oklahoma State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. It says "Go Pokes" in parentheses there, Dr. Biggs, but that is from Sarah Gregory, the coordinator of the podcast. She went to OSU, so I will say for her "Go Pokes" since she put that in my notes. Or is that okay for me to say
absolutely.
that?
Absolutely. My bachelor's is from OSU, and so is my veterinary degree. So we wear orange on Fridays, America's brightest orange, and we're happy to. It's homecoming. It's homecoming week this week, so everyone is geared up. The fountain in front of the library is orange, and house decks are starting to come together. So we need rain in Oklahoma, like really bad. If homecoming is what brings it, we'll take it. But if it'll hold off through Friday evening, or at least give us a break there, we would enjoy that.
We are joined by another Oklahoma State University graduate as well today, Dr. Wyatt Catron, now practicing veterinary medicine in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. Dr. Catron, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Thanks for having us on. It's dry everywhere, so we could use some rain about everywhere we go. So
it is dry, and we back in September, we in Montana, we host the Montana Angus Tour. About 400 people on average come from all over to attend that, and we had 4 inches of rain fall in about a 24-hour period. So we got to showcase what it looks like wet. And we haven't had much since that biblical amount of rain fell on us here in Montana. But according to the meteorologists, we're supposed to have a tough winter. But we'll take that as that comes. We're stocking up on some feed here at home too. But Dr. Biggs, you were discussing going to Oklahoma State University and now being on faculty there as well. What drove your passion to follow veterinary medicine and go down that academic route, and then also find yourself back in the academic arena as well?
Well, I think when I graduated, if you would have told me I would have ended up here, I would have probably laughed at you. That academia was not really in my scope. But I've taken, as far as driving my passion for veterinary medicine and where that fits in animal agriculture, specifically the beef cattle industry, to certainly my parents' influence and involvement in things like 4-H and FFA. As I mentioned, my mother was a veterinarian. I grew up on a ranch here in central Oklahoma. Showed cattle. A big Shorthorn fan from the show side of things, and when I was graduating, we have horses too, and the dean actually asked me not so long ago, said, well, why'd you go into mixed animal practice? And I said, because I have a lot of horses. And I said, the dean, it's cows. You just got to work on cows. And so I was in mixed practice, and I later worked for USDA as well, that has some shortages there too, frankly, on those that are in public practice, and then ended up here at Oklahoma State, doing beef cattle extension, as well as having the opportunity to do a little bit of research and teach in the veterinary school. And so it's my favorite job. Like, I get to do all kinds of kinds of cool things. And I try to impress that to our students, that particularly in this, there's no better time to be a veterinarian in my mind, because it is create your own adventure. Like, and I think Dr. Catron is a great example of that, doing it the way that works for him, works for his family, and gets to outline it, and basically improve the industry in the process.
Yeah, I really look forward to expanding on those points of what works for the veterinarian, for their families, for their communities. Look forward to expanding on that point, Dr. Biggs. So thank you for that brief intro into to yourself and your background as well. And Dr. Catron, same question for you. Now, let's talk about your background, where you grew up, and how you found yourself in vet med.
So I grew up in eastern Oklahoma, a little small town called Stillwell. Was very involved in 4-H and FFA, showed livestock. We showed meat goats growing up. We kind of caught that wave as it was taking off. Then when I started to go to college, I was like, well, you can do livestock judging, or you can try some other things. And I toured OSU, fell in love with the campus. And I was like, this is where I feel at home. Kind of same, got my undergrad there, went to vet school there. Spent my time working on I worked on a ranch there in Stillwater, worked at the Sheep and Goat Center. So when I was an undergrad, I tried to get a ton of different experiences to figure out what I wanted to do.
Well, again, thank you for joining us here today. I know you both have busy days, so you'll try to put up with this broke rancher that talks for a living here today, and hopefully not roll your eyes too much at me as we make our way through our conversation. But, when we look at the role that veterinarians play in our rural communities and in our livestock operations, they truly are an essential part of our businesses. And so when we look at this, Dr. Biggs, can you share with us why it's important when working with veterinary students or those looking at the pre-vet route, about the importance of maybe exploring the large animal veterinary career, or multi-facets of where a student can go? And what are those conversations like, and how has the veterinary industry and associations come together to really put a light on the need to have rural veterinarians?
Well, as I talk to young people that are interested in this path, and we've worked in that area, particularly here at Oklahoma State, on a number of youth initiatives. In my mind, the veterinarian is critical from even before conception all the way through harvest, right? And we have, different veterinary roles all the way along there. But for young people that are interested in this, I really want them to understand what they're getting into, right? Like, I joke when I talk about this topic, particularly rural veterinary shortage or underservice, like, nobody goes to veterinary school because you think you're going to get rich and famous, right? Like that does not happen. And in my mind too, as I work with producers, it's my goal to, if I'm your private veterinarian in particular, I want us both to be successful. You make money, and I make money, and we both stay in business, or become less broke. I mean, we're probably Dr. Catron and I are both broke ranchers a little bit too ourselves, so we understand that producer perspective. But for our students, we have to encourage them to really grab a hold, take the opportunities that are before them to really experience veterinary medicine and all that it can offer. But also understand that it is not, it's not all baby calves every single day. And there are hard parts to it. It is not all about dealing with animals every day. There's more people than animals, frankly, as we work into practice, and there are challenges. It's expensive. Our tuition and fees and things, most of our graduates have in excess of 6 figures worth of debt. And as that relates to starting salaries are getting better, but they're not where they need to be in many regions of the United States to address and service that debt, and also kind of lay down roots, like buy a house, if you want a few acres, that kind of thing, to get started there. And so we've had a number of initiatives here at Oklahoma State, worked with other groups across the nation, other universities, and that kind of thing. I think it's worth pointing out too, this is not a unique situation for the U.S. This is really an international issue. Even as early as 2020, when we started some rural veterinary issues webinars from OSU without advertising, we have people joining us from Australia, South America, et cetera, to talk about this issue. And I think really within the last 5 years, there's been a lot more conversation than there has been. And so, and I'm encouraged by that, particularly groups like Oklahoma Cattlemen have featured a number of veterinary issues. NCBA has taken a look at it as well. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss it. So,
Dr. Catron, any comments on from your end?
Well, the issue is definitely multifaceted. Dr. Biggs has hit on a bunch of those issues. For me, I didn't mention it in the beginning, I guess. So what I do in a practice is mostly food animal work. So I'm in either stockyards or on the farm every day. And there's definitely a shortage of veterinarians, but I think the issues, once again, is multifaceted. There's not going to be one approach to solve the whole issue. And I think that's important to remember is there's a lot of things that go into this and there's not one idea that's going to take care of it all for us.
And does geography and location play a big role? And again, I'm maybe going to ask for statistics that you may not have or may not have been explored, but I think of parts of Oklahoma and particularly Montana where we have very small populations. It's several hours away from a Walmart. There's not a gym for people to work out in. And you think of more of the Midwest where there's bigger cities, there's more amenities. I think that's something a lot of people overlook because some people may not want to move to Alzada, Montana.
Well, we have those issues. There's pluses and minuses to being everywhere. I'm going to assume that Alzada, Montana has some perks that maybe the centralized area of the Midwest doesn't have to offer. At least that's our students that are heading to Montana tell me that, and I believe them. I'm kind of a fair weather. I can't handle the cold, so I visit up north during the summer. But with that, just what you said is a challenge. We have many of the same struggles as other healthcare professions of trying to get new graduates to rural areas. One of the biggest challenges, particularly from my friends that are private practitioners and employers of new graduates, is spousal employment, right? And so particularly if you have a spouse that has a job that is geographically specific, that can be a huge challenge. I think we have some advantages, potentially good things that came out of the pandemic with more remote work or telework in those areas. And as we look at rural broadband, helping it, but it can be a big challenge to convince somebody that's used to the Walmart being open 24 hours a day and access to groceries, or goodness, the concept of grocery delivery, right to your, that didn't happen when I was a kid. Like, we're going to stock up for several weeks because we're not going to get back to town until for a while. And so those kind of things become challenging. Access to childcare is a challenge for many of our recent graduates and or practice owners, and practice structures too, right? Like, we are trying to push both our graduate veterinarians as well as our students to develop skills that are an added value service to their producers, because practice structures that are solely based on emergencies are good operations. They need us only certain times of the year potentially. And so how do we develop that? How do we develop a non-fire engine type practice that's constantly reactive and that we're both progressing together? Because emergency-based practices can be really challenging, and you can't count on the income. And so if you're trying to maintain a business, trying to survive, make sure your family has the things that they need, it's got to be an income flow, a cash flow that makes sense really year round, and not just be reactive to an emergency type situation.
So as practicing veterinarians and educators as well, obviously we're focused on the cattle end of things here too today. And we could throw equine in there too. So many of us utilize equine on our operations, but what are some of the key things that you've seen over the past 10, 20 years or trends that you've been able to look over when it comes to how the rural veterinary shortage is impacting the beef cattle business?
Well, I think for, in Oklahoma, and I'll speak to and I'll let Dr. Catron kind of give his perspective with a more recent grad of what he's seeing, day in and day out. But from the time that I graduated, so I've been out about 20 years at this point, the accessibility to emergency coverage has been challenging, right? Like we have people coming to our teaching hospital, our college for emergencies from hours away, which would have never occurred. We have, because individuals are trying to maintain a not working 24/7, right? Like that's not sustainable for most folks. And most veterinarians work far greater than a 40-hour week. So don't get me wrong, as particularly those in the large animal side of things. But that emergency coverage, we've seen trends where if you're not an existing client, we're not going to provide you emergency coverage for most private practices because there's only so much bandwidth and an ability for us to serve in that manner. So those are things we've seen. We've certainly seen changes in regulation, particularly antibiotics that are no longer available over the counter, veterinary feed directives that have been a greater focus really from and those are consumer driven at the end of the day. I like to say, like, those were not necessarily the veterinary profession's ideas, right? Like we understand the concepts of them, but we had enough to do to begin with too. And so being able to work cooperatively with producers is really critical. And again, the things we're trying to teach our students too is what are the things we can do hand in hand with a producer beyond just that basic pregnancy check, right? Like, what are the things we can do? How can we help you with data-driven decisions in particular so that we can avoid those 2 a.m. C-sections, for instance? Like, nobody's happy to see each other at 2 a.m., not the producer and not the veterinarian. And also, again, if you don't have a veterinarian, they're probably not going to see you at 2 a.m. And so those are some of the trends we've seen. We've certainly also seen it, with my time in public practice. It's becoming more and more challenging to fill those roles with food safety inspection service and others. I have a concern because I have dealt with emergency response. If we should have an incursion of foreign animal disease like foot and mouth disease, how are we going to be able to respond to that effectively if we don't have enough veterinarians boots on the ground to respond in an appropriate manner? So I've probably said too much, but those are things that kind of keep me up at night.
No, I think those are very important points to bring up and to highlight here today. And, when we're looking at it too, Dr. Catron, when you went through to get your doctorate, what were some of your classmates? What were some of their motivations to go into vet med? And were they all looking at large animal vet? Did some change course halfway through in their decision-making process? And maybe even share some of your undergrad, because I know there was a lot of undergrad students I went with that were on that pre-vet path, and they changed direction. So I guess what's it like? What was it like with your peers? What are some things we can do to keep students on that track, or have an early indication that this might not be for you? I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
So as far as the motivations go with my classmates, I'd say if we were to chart them all out, we'd have, like, I had 106 classmates in the beginning. There were probably 106 different answers for why they came to vet school. As far as most of them, they wanted to do a mixed practice. Towards the end of it, a lot of them just went straight small. They wanted to be only small animal vets. They realized that large animal side just wasn't for them. And I think it starts with, and I will say, one of the first weeks of class, somebody asked, how many of you guys worked in a veterinary practice? And there was a fair amount of classmates that I had that had never set foot inside a veterinary practice, which is scary because how do you know what it's going to be like if you've never experienced that? But as far as trying to get more people into the rural medicine, into those areas and large animal related fields, they've got to get that experience. And for me, I nearly switched my senior year because I had the crippling student loan debt. I didn't know if I could sleep at night. Now I work so hard that I sleep pretty good at night, but so that was a big fear for me. And it kept me up a lot of nights because I just don't know if I can take on this much student loan debt and survive. And with the story, you can survive and you can take it on, but it was scary. And I mean, that was something I nearly changed for, but my girlfriend at the time, she's like, no, this is what you always want to do. You need to do it. And so that was the only holdback, I guess, for me going to veterinary school, because I wanted to go my entire life. But the biggest holdback for me was student loan debt.
I think one of the things, being a kid from, a rural area, is we see a lot of our pre-veterinary students start, and our animal science department here at Oklahoma State, historically, 75% or greater usually of those students entering animal science are pre-vet to start. Now, when you look at those numbers after they take that first chemistry class, that is very, very different. And so, I try to encourage, as I have the opportunity to speak to communities or producer groups, or frankly, anybody that'll listen, is we have to have support for our educational system really from the very beginning. And I do think it is in certain rural areas that we have students that are at a disadvantage. There's always exceptions to the rule, but we've got to have students that can compete academically and can handle the academic rigor that is veterinary school. I mean, I've talked to a couple of our first years this year. I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose is what they feel like in many cases. But they also have to have a number of qualities in order to be successful that those rural areas can teach them, like determination and hard work and more grit than you probably need to have figured out in order for them to be successful. And so those are things, supporting a student all the way through and letting them, as Dr. Catron said, get some experience with veterinary medicine firsthand is really important.
Now, what are some strategies that you're seeing with the different universities out there in trying to help lessen that financial strain on the loans and some collaborations? Obviously, I'm familiar with what Montana State University is doing with I think it's WEMU, the Washington, Utah, Idaho, Montana collaboration, where I believe it's 15, 16 students that went through the pre-vet program at Montana State can gets accepted into the Washington State University program, spends their first year of veterinary school in Bozeman. Then they go to Pullman. That seems to be working very well. I'm going to get an update on it next week during our Ag Week and Animal Range Science meetings in Bozeman. But I guess, what are your thoughts on programs like that to be able to lessen that load? And I'm not saying Bozeman, Montana is a cheap place to live either, but what are some other examples that you've seen or maybe you're working with to try to look at that and maybe lessen where these students are going, but still make sure that they're learning, obviously, but getting the hands-on experience that they need?
Well, I think I'm going to speak to national programs that are a little bit more on the after veterinary school side of things. So there's two programs through the USDA and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture. The Veterinary Medicine Loan Repayment Program, which is state by state. Veterinarians can apply to serve certain shortage areas that are nominated by their state animal health official, who is typically the state veterinarian. That particular veterinary medicine loan repayment program is $25,000 of veterinary school debt relieved in turn for service in one of these shortage areas. There is the opportunity for that to renew as well. So we've seen a number of veterinarians that have been very successful in knocking out a tremendous amount of debt with service to shortage areas, typically rural areas, frankly. And that particular program in their last report, I might have the numbers just off just a tick, but 80% of those receiving awards were still serving in the shortage area that they were nominated for and received the award for. So I think those kind of programs are showing it's allowing, graduates to stay put. That is for the individual. There are also practice support programs. Veterinary Services Grant Program through their Rural Practice Enhancement has a great opportunity for practices to have grant funds that can come into the practice to support things like equipment, potentially salaries, vehicles. That can be very supportive in keeping practices afloat, or bringing on new services that they maybe don't have that initial cash injection they need to start that up. And we've seen veterinarians that have also been, taking advantage of both those programs. We've also seen a number of state programs come on board. I'm most familiar with those in this part of the country. The Kansas program with Kansas State. Those programs have shown to be incredibly successful, where students receive awards their first year of veterinary school and are carried all the way through in support of addressing tuition and fees. They're pretty significant awards there in turn for service in communities and counties that are considered rural by the numbers. We've also, within Oklahoma, and I don't want to make this too Oklahoma heavy, but we've pushed heavy, and we've been very fortunate to have incredible support from our legislature. We have our early admittance program that's been a great opportunity for really strong high school students to come in, and they can apply for that their freshman year of undergraduate. And with that, they get an automatic seat as long as they maintain their academics. They get an automatic seat in that vet school class. They have to do some other community service and veterinary kind of work to that. We also recently have, thanks to the Lee Denny Act, which the Oklahoma legislature put through last spring, have been able to give significant awards to our third year and fourth year students in both scholarships as well as loan forgiveness, in turn for serving communities of less than 25,000, with a focus on Oklahoma residents and those that are going to serve in the food animal space. Those kinds of things that program is brand new. Like, we are just naming those awardees, but the challenging part of that as program director for that is we have more students than we have dollars to give them. And so if we are able to do that in a bigger way, I think we can see a number of these positions. We surveyed Oklahoma veterinary practices in 2020 and 21. We have 77 counties in the state of Oklahoma, and we asked, are you currently hiring, or are you trying to hire an associate? And we had 44 counties that said at least one practice in that county was trying to hire. And so that told us that we had tremendous need across, and Kansas has had some survey results too of producers that, do you have a need? The answer is always yes. And so with that, you can debate what that looks like, but we want to be able to serve producers that have a handful of cows to those that are doing it full time, and everything in between, because there's a space for a veterinarian at all those kinds of operations. And certainly that's represented by NCBA too, right, of all of those needs.
Dr. Catron, to expand upon this too, first off, when did you graduate vet school, and how long have you been practicing? And what are some of these programs that you've been able to utilize, or maybe some suggestions you have for some grants or programs that current students or recent grads should look at, and maybe any expand upon any talking points that Dr. Biggs just shared?
Yeah, so I'm a 2023 grad, so I've been out about a year and a half now. What I didn't mention at the beginning is, so I work at the Joplin Regional Stockyards 2 to 4 days a week, and the rest of the time I do mobile practice. And so until I got that position at Joplin, the veterinary loan repayment didn't really fit what I was doing, because I've got clients in a lot of counties, whereas like the veterinary loan repayment wants you to do like 6 or 7 maybe in a tight area. And I go all over in 5 different states. So that was one of the challenges that I had is I'm like, well, I don't really fit anywhere because the requirements for that program. I was like, well, so we're just going to keep going on. But with Joplin now, we're going to apply for that one and try to get the veterinary loan repayment in that area. Dr. Biggs, we've talked about some of the programs that are going on in Oklahoma. I think it's a great opportunity for some of those Oklahoma kids to have some of their student loans paid down. As far as new ideas, I don't know that I have a bunch. Our integrated beef cattle program, which he hasn't mentioned, that was an excellent program. It was with students and veterinarians. So half the class was students, half of them were veterinarians. They did a really good job of networking, exposing us to some of those things that we're not exactly taught in school, like business, finance, human resources. It was an excellent program, and I think they've had very good success with it. You're on your class?
We've just finished our third class, and that integrated beef cattle program was started from one of those veterinary services grant programs that goes to education, extension, and training, back to that USDA NIFA opportunities there. And our goal is, I promise I didn't give him a $20 bill before we started this to say that. I may have twisted his arm a little bit to participate because he was in our first class. But what we've heard from our participants in integrated beef cattle has been like, this is great. We're creating networks. I mean, I think that's one of the challenges in a rural space that can be really tough is there's a certain level of isolation, particularly if you're not from there, right? Like when I went home to practice and they were like, well, you go up and you turn at Dutton Road and then you go past where the old barn was. I knew where that was, right? But if you're not from there, it can feel very isolating. So we're creating networking, we're creating mentoring and coaching, hopefully between our veterinary participants and our student participants. And what we've heard too from those that have completed that program is they want more. And so we're looking at that moving forward to maybe a 2.0 version of that to dig into those topics.
Agriculture has changed. How we raise cattle, how we select genetics has changed. But sometimes the view of veterinarians in the producer's mind hasn't changed. The expectation, the need, I need them at the drop of a hat. And we know those emergency situations, and we've talked about that too. Dr. Catron, how have you been working to have your practice fit around your lifestyle, what the things you need to accomplish as a veterinarian, but also as an individual? I do want to bring financial stress. I want to bring mental health and stress into this conversation here today too. I guess you've only been in practice yourself for a short time, but obviously you're very experienced. You've gone through school, you've worked in the field. So I don't want anyone to discredit you're just being a 2023 grad either. But I want you to share the goals that you've set and what you've learned from your peers and your mentors in the veterinary medicine field, and on how you view a large animal veterinarian can balance life here in the 21st century.
Yeah, so I had some really great externships during my final year of school, and that really set me on a path that I was like, this is what I want to do. Because I originally thought I was going to be in a rural mixed practice somewhere, and I was for about 8 months after I graduated, and I just wasn't satisfied with that. I really enjoyed being on the farm, working with food animal producers. So the mobile practice focused a lot on small ruminants, so sheep and goats, but we see a ton of cattle too. But the goal is always, my mission's been to help those producers be more productive and profitable. And you do that by getting on the farm for more than just emergencies. And so we've been bringing in more services that are focused on value-added services like Dr. Biggs talked about. Like I'm at a stockyard right now and we're scanning ewes for a special sale. So we're bringing value to those sheep and making them bring a little bit more for those producers that are bringing them in. And as far as the work-life balance goes, it's something that there's not going to be a right answer. And I have to juggle it every week. Because Joplin, depending on the run we're having, it's one of the biggest stockyards in the country. We'll run 7,000 to 10,000 calves a week and about 1,000 cows a week. Mondays and Wednesdays, that keeps me very busy. Last night, I was there till about 9 o'clock. And so sometimes my wife's not too happy with that. But then we make up for it on these other days where I don't have as much going on. And so it's kind of I guess the whole thing is more of a juggling act.
Yeah.
and you just have to make sure you're keeping all the right pins up in the air.
Yep. And Dr. Biggs, what are some resources, some mentorships that are available? And I don't know what respective associations you may belong to in terms of professional development, but mental stress is a big thing for farmers and ranchers. It's being talked about. It's a difficult topic for so many people out there. Here in Montana, a veterinarian recently passed away due to suicide. I don't know all the factors in there, nor am I going to share things I don't know, but there's stress in this profession. There's the stress of trying to help your neighbors out, keep them profitable, be there at the drop of the hat if you can. I guess what are some resources and strategies that the veterinary associations are maybe helping with, and veterinary schools are helping equip these young people coming out of school with to help face these challenges and be resilient?
Absolutely. I think from the veterinary standpoint, we've had more of these discussions in the last 5 to 10 years than maybe ever within veterinary medicine. And they're really each individual species focus. Certainly, American Association of Bovine Practitioners has had a focus on mental health and wellness, because we're subject to very similar strains, particularly those operating in the rural space that farmers and ranchers are as well. But we also need to be able to be responders in that. We've had a lot of education on mental health first aid that has been brought to bear by the veterinary profession, and really organizations, including industry, taking a look at mental health and wellness and just elevating the conversation, right? And then putting resources together. I think that groups like Not One More Veterinarian or Not One More Vet is a good opportunity, and really any of our species groups have really taken it on to let's talk about it. And it's not unique to male veterinarians. It's not unique to female veterinarians. It's across the board, and also to have the resource to help our clients too, right? Like, we may be the one that steps out on the farm or ranch and recognizes some characteristics where there need to be some interventions to support that particular producer, because working in agriculture is not easy, and it is hard, and it is challenging, and it can pose a lot of challenges in a lot of different ways. But the one thing we don't want to have happen are any losses of individuals subject to that when we have help that is available. So, as far as looking for resources of understanding the profession, a great resource that's relatively new is put together by the Farm Journal Foundation. Now, it's not specific to mental health and wellness, but it does mention those, and it has modules there for pre-veterinary students, for veterinary students, and early career graduates in a wide scope, and folks can find that at ruralveterinaryworkforcesolutions.org if they're interested in taking a look. And it's kind of at their pace, and it allows young people to look into some of the things that are maybe not often talked about, but need to be more so in a very safe environment. We focus our students. We have a counselor on site at the College of Veterinary Medicine to provide resources to our students, and certainly elevate the conversation with continuing education on doing things better in a better way.
Now, as we are in agriculture, we're always looking to find solutions and to fix issues that are out there. So for our listeners out there here today, what can cattlemen and women do to help be part of the solution, to help find ways to support veterinarians or students going through to help fill this shortage? What can we do to address shortage issues like housing, resources and support in rural communities, and also be a support on issues like mental health for our fellow neighbors here in rural America? What can cattle producers do to help fix this issue, or at least not just put our finger in the hole in the dam, but really help patch things up and make a bright future for so many out in rural America?
I think the biggest thing is, for those listening, if you're not already working with a veterinarian, find a time to find a veterinarian and get a hold of them before it's an emergency situation. Have them out on the farm, just check out everything when it's normal, because that's one of the best times for us to take a look at everything. It's one of the best ways for us to help you is if we get a picture of what normal looks like. And then, if you've got a new veterinarian moving in, try to be welcoming to them. Take them out to supper, take them out to breakfast, wherever you can catch them, and don't just hammer them with free vet. Don't just ask for all the free vet advice while you got them pinned in there. But I think there's a lot of different ways people can help, but just being overall supportive to these new younger veterinarians coming in, because sometimes we can be viewed as outsiders. I have a lot of female classmates, and sometimes that's very difficult for them to go into some of these rural communities where they're not seen as equal. And I think some of them have a lot of challenges with that. And some of those girls work just as hard or harder than I do. I mean, they can work, and you just got to give them the opportunity. And the same with just all of these younger, newer vets that are coming in. Just give them the opportunity to earn it, and they will.
Well, I think cattlemen and women can do what they do best, is right. Invite more people to the table, right? And include veterinarians in the discussions for your operation. Make sure that you are paying people for the knowledge that they bring to that table, right? And also, sometimes we just need to say, like, I had a veterinary friend post this week, like, a thank you and a plate of cookies goes pretty far, right? Like, we don't have high expectations. We're not getting tipped on the regular. That's not why we're doing it. We want people to be successful. We want to solve problems, both for you and your operation, but as well as improve animal health and welfare at the end of the day. Additionally, if you have young people that are interested in this path, we need people across the veterinary team, whether that's veterinary assistants, whether that's veterinary technicians, whether that's veterinarians. We need practice managers as well. So across that scope, encourage them and put them in positions to be successful, and empower them to set some goals and give them the resources to achieve those.
Well, I have a lot more questions, but I know we have a time stop here for today's podcast. Dr. Biggs has to make an appointment, and we fully understand that. But we covered a lot, and maybe we'll continue this conversation down the road on maybe a recap. But I truly just want to thank both of you for the work that you do and being a resource in the countryside, for being a business partner for cattlemen and women, and also being an educator as well. So I just want to thank Dr. Rosslyn Biggs for joining us, and Dr. Wyatt Catron for joining us here today as well, talking about the shortage of rural veterinarians out in the countryside, and just taking a few minutes for answering the Cattlemen's Call. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
With that, friends, do your part. Take that tray of cookies to your veterinarian as well, and pay your bills on time. Dang it, that's important too. But support them, learn along with them too, and be a resource for them as well. With that, friends, that will do it for today's conversation on the Cattlemen's Call. I'm Lane Nordlund. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattlemen's Call podcast with Lane Nordlund. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.